And away we go. It's the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com. Dan Strafford, Dave Lockern along with you on this Monday morning. We have a 6-game NBA slate. I'm going to start off by saying I hate the New England Patriots, but that is not why we're here. Dave, how the hell are you doing?
Doing good, man. If I despise the Patriots as much as you did, I would I get it. But I had a good night, man. I placed the bet on what will the result of Tom Brady's first pass be? Completion, incompletion, or interception? Interception was plus 2,500, and I bet on that. Now, with these wild prop bets with bad odds, if I like them, I'm only betting between $15 and $50 on them, right?
Right.
So I put 15 on it, but it was 15, won 375 on it. Patriots to score 0 points in the first quarter. Got that. And another one, I bet Gladys Knight under 155. And the interesting thing is that, first of all, it opened at 145 and it got bet up. I was like, I'll take the under here. It's bet up 10. It got bet up 10 seconds on the site that I use. And I swore I lost. I mean, I clocked it.
I had her at 201.
So did I. I got paid out for
Are
under
you for real?
155. Yeah, no joke. No joke. I got paid out for under 155. So we'll take it.
I'll be honest. Like when she hit the Brave, right? And home of the Brave, which I hope, listen, I'm not the most patriotic person, but I hope you know the end of the Star Spangled Banner. But home of the Brave, I had that moment of saying, are they going to count where she takes the breath? Because she took an extra breath and then hit probably another 6 seconds of song there. So they may not have. They may have cut it off there and paid you out. And good for you. Good for the under better there. But
I mean, because most people were betting over on that, and that it was,
of course, they were.
Obviously from all the information we have on that, obviously the over was the bet. But when it got bet up 10 seconds, I was like, yeah, I'll take that.
Listen, this isn't a betting show, but I think that's the good point of it's when you get in too. In this wagering market, now that things are getting sharper, you need to pay attention to where lines move to. You need to be aware of the fact that line moved that much. And again, I get it's the national anthem, but it moved 10 whole seconds, and then to take the over at that mark is ballsy. Once it moves that high, you made, I would assume, the statistically correct call, and beyond sort of the gut call of, hey, it's moved that much, I need to take the underside of it. The value's on my side. But yeah, I clocked it at 201. I wonder how many degenerates across the country were at a Super Bowl party. We're at a neighbor's house. He smoked some brisket and he smoked some chicken. It was very nice.
Oh, that's what we did. We had smoked brisket.
There you go. I ran into him on Saturday. I coach his daughter in rec basketball, and he came up. He's like, hey, I tried to get a 13-pound brisket, but I got a 24-pound brisket. Do you want to come over for Super Bowl Sunday? I was like, am I getting invited just because you have too much brisket? But fine, whatever. I'm down.
Everyone always has too much brisket for some reason.
Isn't it? I mean, how do you have too little? But we went over, and I'm the guy in the corner with my stopwatch out on my cell phone, timing last night. And I had 201, and I felt I was fast on the trigger. I thought I was late on starting and early on ending, but there it is. We do have 6 games. The NBA this week is very balanced. We are heading towards the All-Star break. The trade deadline is on Thursday. If you haven't seen in the past, and I will say, I honestly don't know what the plans for Awesemo. Dave, specifically, Dave Lockern, at Lofty_D, LOUGHY_D. Each year on trade deadline has been awesome about breaking down where players move and how that influences things. I don't know the plans this year, and Dave, if you know separately from me about trade deadline, any coverage that Awesemo.com might have. But if you want to hear it on Friday, you'll hear it from Dave on the podcast, and you'll also hear it on the deeper dive that happens at 5 p.m. And Dave has the write-up for the day on the deep dive on Friday as well. But each and every year, Dave, now this is dating back to Kitchen and Davis and the like at Fantasy Insiders and then at FanVice, has taken a large onus on himself to describe where the moves happen and how that influence things. But trade deadline's coming up. This week is very balanced, though, from a schedule perspective. So hopefully the podcasts are quick, succinct, and to the point. Any hot takes on trade deadline? Do you have any quick thoughts? Does Kyrie get dealt? Does Anthony Davis get dealt? Before we hop into this 6-game slate, do you feel like there's any specific player you think is, in fact, on the move?
It's a good question. So I don't know anybody for sure right now that I can say, with certainty will definitely be shipped. And the reason I say that is we've just seen so many trade deadlines get hyped up and then end up being terrible. And then we've seen other trade deadlines you expect nobody to move. And they're huge, right? I remember, what was it, 4 years ago? It was the 3-team trade that involved like MCW and I don't even, obviously the Sixers and I think the Sun. There were a bunch of teams. There were some huge trades. I think I counted 27 trades or 21 trades on that deadline. So no, I really don't know right now. Obviously we know a lot of teams that have nothing to play for are willing to unload people, and the one I'm most interested in is the Memphis Grizzlies. Like, what are we going to see happen with their have been cornerstones of Marc Gasol and Mike Conley? I don't know. It's really interesting. Utah likes Mike Conley a lot. I'll be paying close attention to all of it. We already got a big splash with the Porzingis trade, and is Indiana going to look to make moves with all the depot out? Are they going to say, you know what, we're going to have to bite the bullet and we'll just next year? So I don't know, but you know what? Each year, I have kind of tried to make sure we get a show out there as the trade deadline is going on. A lot of times it's better just to do it after the trade deadline so you can provide analysis instead of trying to do it during, right? Because if it's terrible, then it's just a boring show.
Sure.
Maybe we will, maybe we won't, but we'll see how we're going to do it. And I think it definitely would make sense for us to do one. What is it? It's on the 7th. So what day is that? Wednesday, Thursday, right?
Thursday. Yep.
Thursday. So I think it's always on Thursday.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. How many games are that day? That would make it a lot easier.
6 or 7, I believe. It's a really balanced week, I believe, from the NBA's perspective.
All right. Well, we'll definitely try and make something.
It's a 6-game slate starting at 7 p.m.
By the way, if you took any of those cross-sport bets I mentioned on the podcast or on SiriusXM, Kyrie Irving points assist over Patriot points.
I hope you cashed on that.
Dude. I like that even if the Patriots scored 30, right? Irving had 30 and 11. It was such a good matchup. That game saw like 260 points in regulation. Another great one was Tatum points, rebounds over James White, rushing yards.
Yep.
If you pounded the basketball players on those cross-sport bets, which I liked even with the 56-point total in the Super Bowl, you crushed. I just couldn't find them on sites unless I went to Jersey. A lot of the sites I used didn't have those cross-sport bets, unfortunately. I would have loved it, would have raked it in, but hopefully some people that, are legal in those states and the sites that they use, the books that they use had them. That would be great because they absolutely raked it in. Almost all of them. Maybe all of them. Well, I know all the ones that I referenced did because I was keeping close track of them.
Yeah, there was one I saw that was for a Duke basketball game that was whether or not Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, and Marquez, I think it's Marquise Bolden, would score more points than the Pats. So basically, combined 3 players in a college basketball game would score more than the Pats. Believe they crushed that one. So pretty straightforward in that one. Let's dive in. We have 6 games. We'll get through it pretty quickly here. As I said, you get Dave Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the deep dive. That is the write-up over there on Awesemo.com. For those of you who don't listen regularly, Dave writes you up every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Adam is Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And then you get Dave and Adam. So you get those two on the deeper dive, which is the live show from 5 to 6 most nights, depending on the schedule. If a slate tips off at 7:30 or 8, they might shift it. But you do get them every day, getting you ready for each and every slate. So 6-game slate here. They'll have an hour show from 5 to 6, getting you ready for this slate. Over there on YouTube, You get Live Before Lock with Josh or Spags, along with Ed Fear. That leads you up to Lock, surprisingly, by the name of the show. And then in the morning, around 9:15, you'll get Adam and Josh for the NBA Strategy Show. I'm going to wager, and this will be my last wager of Super Bowl Sunday, that Adam's hungover for that show. Just my guess. I love you, Adam, but that's my guess. I will put a few dollars on that. And he's not going to mention it. You're just going to see it. You're going to understand that he had a night. And that's why I'm a big fan of I'm a Boss over there on FanDuel.com. It's so much fun. We should get a 3-man show at some point in this basketball season for the podcast to get Adam on. Hopefully more intoxicated than not. Let's get into position by position here. As we always do, we go point guard on through center. We do use DraftKings as our price indicator here. We will check in on FanDuel. We'll see what Yahoo has, but we are using DraftKings as sort of our jump off point. It's our first look. It's Dave's first look. He does have the write up. So take this as your first look. Take the NBA Strategy Show as that next step. And then the article Dave writes, all those pieces tie together. If you want to be a member of Awesemo.com, and you should, ownership projections, Awesemo's grades, projections from Josh and team, and the write-up, you want to use the promo code EARLYBIRD, gets you 50% off your first month at Awesemo.com. So, Dave, we get James Harden here against the Phoenix Suns. He put up, a pedestrian 86.5 DraftKings points. I do need to mention Chris Paul was on the shelf. He is not listed on the injury report for this game. I need to ask you up front, do you want to hold Harden for shooting guard, or do you want to handle him here at point guard?
We'll talk about him at shooting guard. Right. It's not that big of a slate. I think we can kind of try and cut him up here a little bit.
All right, so let's take point guard, where it does start with Devin Booker, who also has MPE, Drew Holiday, D'Angelo Russell, Trae Young, De'Aaron Fox. And then you get Bledsoe, who's been dinged up a little bit. Chris Paul, who's no longer on the injury report, as I said, has a same matchup against Phoenix. And then you get into the likes of Morris and Collison and some of the mid-tier guys who may have some upside, but also certainly don't have as high of floors. Booker against Houston, I guess you could project out some high-scoring affair here where Booker is taking a ton of shots. Drew Holiday is getting all the usage now that seemingly every single front court player is injured for New Orleans. And then D'Angelo Russell's at 7,900, but has a matchup with Milwaukee, one of the best defensive teams in the National Basketball Association. Let's say 7,900 above. We'll take Trae Young and below later. Booker, Holiday, Russell. Any of these top price guys at least jump into your consideration on the Monday slate?
Yeah, no question. I mean, only 6 games, so we don't have a ton to work with. But looking at the top of point guard, I do think Booker's an interesting play here. Wouldn't be surprised to see this game stay close either. I mean, it's an 8-point spread, but I'm not too worried. 230 total. Devin Booker's price, yeah, it's getting up there. But still, we know that this guy's ceiling is massive, right? And he's coming off 2 games with 40-plus minutes played in each, 57, 60 fantasy points, respectively. That's the type of production you can expect to see from him in these type of games. I do think Booker's a fine play here. Now, obviously, you have to ask yourself, you have Harden on this slate against that Phoenix team with Chris Paul back, 12-9. Giannis Antetokounmpo against Brooklyn at 10-9. Nikola Jokic against Andre Drummond and the Pistons at 10-5. Bradley Beal against Atlanta. And then you've got Devin Booker, Blake Griffin, Drew Holiday, so on and so forth. So, no, I do think Booker's a strong play here. But when you're talking about Drew Holiday, tough, not the greatest matchup against Indy. And he's, you know what? He's had a couple games since all of these guys, Randall, Mirotic, Davis, Moore, Payton, with all these guys out, that really haven't been that great. But I still plan on going back to the well here. I just, I don't see why you wouldn't. And we're talking about a Pacers team that without Oladipo has really looked flat. I mean, they've looked bad. They're 1-point favorites, but it's at 1-point favorites in this game, 217.5 total. It is a pace down spot for Drew. But at 8,700, I just think you're getting too good of a spot for somebody like Drew Holiday, and I would expect him to be a little bit more expensive, regardless of the production that we've seen from him. You're still talking about somebody that's going to see massive usage. Facilitating duties are going to be almost entirely on his shoulders. Sure, Frank Jackson will see some, maybe a little Tim Frazier, but Drew Holiday is the guy here, and he's 9,100 on FanDuel, shooting guard eligible, but I still think very viable there. So another thing too, I want to keep an eye on some of these injuries. Does Murray sit? Does Corey Joseph sit? We'll get into that in a second. If he does, it could get a little bit interesting. And I believe Corey Joseph, he's still questionable. Joe Harris, questionable. Not a ton of guys that are questionable. Jamal Murray, Harris, and Joseph are the only ones that have really any relevance here. Aside from that, I think that's probably it, right? I think that's it.
I think so, yeah.
Yep. So yeah, that's what we have working for us there. Booker and Holiday are both in play. But I think in cash games, Holiday is your safer play. Booker in tournaments is really nice. But both of them have that, 55, 60 fantasy points that you're looking for, that you're hoping for. And then you go from there. I'm not sleeping on D'Angelo Russell, though, and here's why. You've seen his price drop below 8K. He's still somebody that can jack up 25 shots across 36 minutes in a game. And if that's the case, I'm not opposed to running him out there in some tournaments. We talked about him being priced at his ceiling. Well, at 7,900, you're not really priced at your ceiling anymore. We'd love to see him cheaper, but there's no reason he should be any cheaper than that. I'm not ruling Russell out. I'm not taking him off the table. I think it's a perfectly reasonable spot for him, and I have no problem getting there. But really, it is a pretty short slate that has plenty of viable options. I mean, we could talk about Chris Paul, who's 6,600, yep. Played 29 or almost 30 minutes last game. So there's that. He's coming back. I'd expect him to get up to around, 31, maybe more. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not on any restrictions. We'll see what Mike D'Antoni says prior to the game. But yeah, you've got him at that price point. You've got Satoransky against Atlanta at 56. Sure, Satoransky isn't a guy you like to pay mid 5K for, but it's also against the Atlanta Hawks, are one of the worst defensive teams in the league. Defensively in the backcourt, they're dreadful. I don't even care if Kent Bazemore is back in the mix, because he's not going to be guarding Satoransky anyway. You're going to see mostly Kent Bazemore sticking Beal for most of the time when both of them are on the court, and then you'll see Satoransky against a guy like Trae Young, who defensively has been miserable this year. I actually think it's a really good spot for Satoransky. And then Darren Collison, here's another spot where he really let us down the one day, and then has followed it up with two straight pretty solid games on the 31st and on the 2nd of February. Corey Joseph played both of those games. So if you don't have any Corey Joseph, you could see Collison's minutes creep up significantly higher, depending on what they decide to do with some of these bench guys. I tell you what, it really is a solid position. And I'll just close it out here because we're kind of on a roll. No Derek White either. So what are we going to see happen with the point? Oh, dude, another one. This is crazy. Frank Jackson. Mm-hmm. Frank Jackson, there's too much here, man. Frank Jackson's last game played 42 minutes against the Spurs. Meanwhile, Tim Frazier in that same game played 27 minutes. A lot of minutes to be had there. Drew Holiday only played, 29, 30 minutes in that game. So you obviously don't expect Jackson to see that much run, but does it really matter? I mean, if Frank Jackson plays 32, 33 minutes, he's $3,700. And then there's no Derek White either. So do we get more run from Bryn Forbes, more opportunity from him, from potentially Patty Mills, who I don't even think is necessary with all of the options we have? What a deep position for a 6-game slate, huh?
Pardon if you hit on them, but what about the Denver backcourt between Morris and the other pieces that are coming forward as they have some injuries there? You have Morris, you have Beasley. Is the price tag starting to creep up too high on a Morris at 6K on DraftKings, 5,500 on a Beasley, or do you still think for the minutes that are being played, those are more than reasonable price tags?
It's a good question. And I mentioned this in the deep dive and in the deeper dive the other day. Monty Morris, one fascinating thing is, since entering the starting lineup he played those back-to-back games on the 1st and the 2nd of February, Monty Morris is not just playing like off the ball, kind of hanging around, letting Jokic do his thing, letting Barton do a lot of the ball handling. That hasn't been the case. As a matter of fact, potential assists per game, you have Jokic over these 2 games with 15 leading the team. Monty Morris is second with 11. The next closest player is Millsap and Barton at 5.5 and 5 respectively. So Monty Morris is definitely getting that work. And that's very encouraging, because just because you're starting at a certain position doesn't really mean much unless we kind of dig into those numbers. And those two I'd mentioned after the first start were important to me. His assist totals have looked good. And second to that, if you look at his touches per game, how about this? Monty Morris leads the Nuggets in touches per game with 92.5 averaged over those 2 games. Nikola Jokic is second. So he's not just out there. He's getting work. Now, with that in mind, okay, do I like Monty Morris? Yeah, he's played really well. Do I think he's reasonable at his price point if Jamal Murray sits? Now, Murray is questionable, so we don't know if he's going to play. Do I like him if he sits? Yeah, I think he's perfectly fine. Do I think he's a must-play, though? No, and here's why. Number one, Detroit, it's a pretty neutral matchup. They don't play at the fastest pace. Defensively, they're okay in the backcourt, but they certainly don't scare you. I think Morris is a very solid play, just not a must-play, and a couple reasons for that are you do have Chris Paul. Let's say D'Antoni says no more minute restriction. He gets up to 33 minutes. You're taking Chris Paul at a very close, comparable price point against Phoenix. Satoransky against Atlanta. I know he hasn't been putting up the same numbers, but he's proven that he's got a high enough ceiling in good spots, and he's facing an Atlanta team that he's averaging north of a fantasy point per minute against this season. He's getting a lot of minutes in close games as well. And then you have Frank Jacksons, and a lot of players here that make for really strong plays. So while I like Monty Morris, I think he was a much better play. I think it was on Friday. Yeah, Monty Morris was a much better play on Friday, where you could get him at like 4K on FanDuel at shooting guard, even 52 or 53 or whatever he was on DraftKings, where you didn't have a ton of value. There is enough value here to say good play, not a must play.
Lots here for a 6-game slate, and I think that's going to make for a fun lineup construction on Monday. And often it can be pretty top-heavy at point guard, but lots to spread around. So decisions to be made and some fun to be had with Fantasy Cruncher, if that is the way you go about it, and how you set your caps and where you're trying to figure out exactly where to get a leg up on the field. And some way to do that is often ownership, and that is one of the things Osmo.com offers. And is it an exact science? No. I think anybody would admit that. But Osmo.com, the most accurate, or at least from what I've seen, in ownership projections each and every day. And should that be the only thing you consider? No. But should it be part of your GPP process and trying to figure out where exactly you can get a leg up on competition? Absolutely. So if you want to do just that, get a 50% off for your first month, use the promo code EARLYBIRD. One more, you see it here on screen. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe, share us. If you're over there on iTunes, yeah, Dave's thumbs up, my thumb, both thumbs. If you're over there on iTunes, subscribe, leave a comment, like, share it. If you're on any of the other podcast apps, do the same. Share us on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter at Dan Trafford, at Lofty_D. If you don't know by now, it's LOUGHY_D. And then follow, of course, Osmo_com. But mainly YouTube, iTunes, the main places to follow us. Shooting guard is up next. A lot of these players carry over, but you already went down this path to an extent, Dave. You have James Harden at 12-9. Chris Paul is back. So Paul at, 28 to 32 minutes, let's say, as probably a low-end projection. He's not on the injury report. Should have a decent run here in this matchup with Phoenix. We can consider blowout if everyone wants to, but let's not for this discussion. Harden at 12-9. Then you get Giannis, as you said, at 10-9. Jokic at 10-5. Beal's at 9-1. And then we roll on. At shooting guard specifically, it's Beal, then Booker, Drew, and D'Angelo Russell, we've talked about already. And DeMar DeRozan, I should point out, is already all the way down to 7,500. How do you approach James Harden on this specific 6-game slate? Is he in or is he out of your early player pool? Things can change. Obviously, value opens up. That completely changes whether or not you can go to someone like Harden. What do you see early on here, and how do you approach Harden on this slate?
Yeah, so I think we're going to have enough value where you can play him. And that's kind of what it comes down to for me. You know, on some nights it's like, okay, Chris Paul's back. That kind of sucks. And it's not like James Harden is cheap. But if we've got a spot where you say, okay, well, is there enough value to get him in there comfortably and we like these cheap plays, then what's it matter, right? Because the extra 1K you'd be spending on him, you know, over somebody else it's not putting the huge dent in your cap space or in your lineups when you have the Frank Jacksons and the Sadoranskis and whoever's going to come out of the San Antonio situation, potentially out of Denver. I think it's going to be relatively easy to play James Harden, which, you know, isn't something we've been able to say at 13-6, even 12-9. So yeah, I think James Harden is perfectly fine.
All right, so we get Harden, obvious upside. You have the opportunity, and again, I've harped on this more than Dave has. But when we talk about Harden being in play, it's not 100% of lineups. You're going to have lineup builds that don't have James Harden in it. You're going to have lineup builds that do. If you're playing mass multi-entry here, so you're going to have different constructions. If you're playing a single lineup or maybe 3 max or 20 max. It's going to be a different build and a different way to go about things. So keep that in mind as you're trying to figure out exactly where your player ownership comes in. If we take Harden out of the mix, or at least put him to the side for now, 12-9, he's viable. We know he can be in play. You have Beal, and then you dive into a mix of players who are shooting guard and point guard, and then more so small forward eligible. Beal, Booker, Holiday, D'Angelo Russell. I love your take on DeMar DeRozan here, just overall, this matchup with Sacramento. Then you get the likes of Jamal Murray with the Q tag, Middleton, Will Barton's at 6,100, and then we'll close it out. Let's leave it there. We'll say 6K and above. What's your take? How do you approach a guy like Brad Beal against Atlanta? And then I would love your viewpoint on DeMar DeRozan here at 7,500.
All right, yeah. Well, Bradley Beal is a strong play against Atlanta. I think I'd throw him into the same category as Devin Booker and Drew Holiday, right? All of them very comparable. And right now, if we're talking about, you know, projections, I have Beal and Holiday about 1.5, 1.3 fantasy points separated. Booker a few down, about 3 less than Beal, maybe 1.7 fewer than Drew Holiday. So all of them, you know, really strong plays here. If I were to prioritize them, I think I actually would be putting Bradley Beal second behind Drew and then ahead of Booker. I really do think Drew has a game here. You're getting him slightly cheaper, but the truth is, Dan, you can't go wrong with any of these guys. I don't think you can go. It sounds crazy because it is a tough matchup for Russell, but I'm not sure you can go wrong with Russell at this price either. You know, you're getting a big discount on him, a guy who is basically the same price as Beal and Booker and Holiday, just 1 or 2 games back. So I'm not against it whatsoever. And then you also have, as you pointed out, you also have DeMar DeRozan. I hate being the guy to say, like, these guys are all in play in the same tier because it does nobody any good. But yeah, DeRozan's viable too. It's funny because he has struggled lately, but you know, you look at the shot volume. The shot volume is still up. He's still getting plenty of work. He just hasn't looked great, you know, and you've seen him struggle to actually knock those shots down. In tournaments, yeah, I do like DeRozan a lot, but I can't really consider him in cash right now until we see something change, especially given how deep this position is, how deep the slate is, how deep the mid-range guards are. There's just too much here for me to say that, you know, he's going to be a priority for me. In tournaments, it's a different story. But I do think I think with all of these guys so closely grouped together, like 5 shooting guards here, whether it be Beal, Holiday, Russell, Booker, DeRozan, all of them in really favorable spots or just with very favorably, really nicely priced. And we're not even talking about Harden. I want to see what the ownership looks like. What the projected ownership looks like to me is going to be really important here.
Makes total sense. And that is a reminder, as I said earlier, about the ownership projections over there on awesemo.com. It just gives you a better idea of maybe where you should lean from a tournament perspective. And honestly, from a cash game perspective, you see a projected ownership of 50, 60% on somebody on a short slate. Maybe you should have better ownership there in cash games than you might have thought. to make sure you're equaling the field when it all comes to your cash game lineups. Let's talk about the mid or lower tier of shooting guard, I should say. Does anyone pop off? Is it a Napier or Austin Rivers? You mentioned Kemp Bazemore before from a defensive perspective. Anybody from a mid or cheap perspective that you think at least should be on people's radars for shooting guard on Monday night?
Well, with the multi-position eligibility, we have access to a lot here, right?
Yep.
Frank Jackson. Does Marco Bellinelli get some additional run with Derek White out? It's possible. I'm not necessarily sure yet. They do still have a decent amount of bodies there.
I feel like Marco Bellinelli is becoming my Markieff Morris this year. Like he's slowly becoming that guy that I play more often than I should.
Well, Belly's been pretty good.
He has, but it's just a little bit more than I should.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. You never want to overload on Belly, but he's getting mid-20s per game. If you get him up around 27, you're going to be pretty happy with that. I mean, I still prefer Frank Jackson, but I don't think Bellinelli's a terrible play here. Tyreek Evans is facing his former team, one of many, in the New Orleans Pelicans. I don't buy into it, man. The guys, they are using him really in the worst possible way. He shot 0 for 7 in 16 minutes last game, in a game that they won by 7 over Miami. He looks terrible, and he has looked terrible when Oladipo was out. If you're not going to use him to handle the rock, if he's just going to stand around the perimeter, if he's not going to get drives to the rim, if he's not going to be able to be aggressive, and you're going to have him spotting up and maybe seeing a few assist opportunities per game, what's the point of even having him on the court? I just think that Nate McMillan's using him improperly. And look, I'm not a basketball coach. I sit here and talk about fantasy sports, but we all know when Tyreek Evans succeeds. Like we've seen this, we know this. So I have a problem with that. And while I'm not going to be writing any letters to McMillan anytime soon, I can tell you that I will be staying away from Tyreek Evans until further notice, until either we see him change or his minutes go up or his price bottoms out. And by bottoms out, like he needs to be in the low. He needs to be below 4K with the way he's playing. There's no doubt about it. He really has to be there before I feel even remotely comfortable rostering him, because right now we're not getting what we need from him. He's not seeing enough opportunities or touches, and Tyreek Evans has just never been good when that's how he's used. And then the last guy I'll throw out there, Kenrich Williams, continues to see a lot of minutes, 30, 38, and 30 over his last 3 games. It's not the craziest play. He's still cheap. He's 4,300 on DraftKings. You could do worse than Kenrich Williams against the Pacers team that, once again, really is going to struggle without Oladipo. Still a good defensive team, but if he sees, 30, 33, maybe 36 minutes, you can do a whole lot worse. Really deep at point guard and shooting guard.
Listen, I know someone over there at FanDuel listens to our podcast, and you had this whole run of being sports rich. The fact that you haven't used Kenrich yet.
Oh, no.
You're missing out. You're missing out.
I think they probably tactically avoided that one.
They're missing out, Dave. I'm a marketing genius. Let me tell you, I know what the kids want. The kids want
How would you even use that?
You're going to be sports rich. You're going to be Kenrich Williams. Anyway, we're going to go to small forward next. We talked about the upside or the viability, I should say, more so of James Harden. Giannis is 10-9. He faces the Brooklyn Nets. This seems like a fine, if not high upside spot for him. One where you could see 60, 70, even 80 points from a DraftKings or FanDuel perspective. But we necessarily we just haven't seen that from him as much as we might prefer over the past 2 to 4 weeks. Do you see this as that sort of plus matchup at a lower price point where Giannis can absolutely obliterate his price point? Or do you see some sort of trend here that keeps you away from the small forward?
No, it's, do you, again, with the value that we have, do we want to go to Giannis and, hope he has a really big game? Or do we want to just say, yeah, I'll take my 70 from Harden and I'll take my points. Chris Paul was out for rest and Harden dropped 86 fantasy points against Utah. My God. It's like, you say, I faded him. That was a that was a 1 or 2 or 3% game from Harden. Not really, right? Like not really. With Chris Paul out, that's, I don't know, 25-30% game from Harden. It's just insane. But, Chris Paul had played a bunch of those games, and Harden still had 71, 72, 58. That was a rough one. They played really poorly against Denver, but, he still had 58, and that's not going to be satisfying at 12-9. But if you can get up to Harden over Giannis, you find that extra 2K, which I don't think will be difficult to do, then you're probably going to want to do that. And another big thing to consider is even in those games where Paul was playing, Harden still saw 37, 39, 37 minutes, whereas when you're talking about Giannis, like, as a per-minute guy, he's a beast. But, 35 minutes is what you're usually seeing out of him, sometimes 33 minutes even in closer games. You just never get that from Harden. So, will I have some Giannis? Sure, but I'm not going to have I'm not going to load up on Giannis because I think 10-9 is a pretty reasonable price point. I don't think he's significantly discounted, and that's probably the easiest way to put it.
And that makes total sense. That is this and consideration we should all take. Is this a price point I need to exploit, or is this one that just is fine? Like, is it one that makes sense and is accurately priced and where I can get them? Great. If not, I will move on from it. So things to consider as you go through small forward. You get DeRozan here at 7,500. Hield is 6,700. And then it's a whole lot of shrug emoji, as I've used with my kids of late. But you have Will Barton, Otto Porter Jr., Rudy Gay, Kelly Oubre at 5,800. What the hell are you doing here? Like, what do you got? What are some of the names that you feel like at least are viable at small forward?
Yeah, so you have the MPE on DraftKings again, which makes life kind of easy. You talked about Otto Porter. Probably a spot that we're going to end up on. I do think that he'll see decent ownership here, rightfully so. They're facing Atlanta. They still lead the league in pace. Last I looked, which was Friday or Saturday. I mean, I'll take another look now. They aren't playing at the fastest pace over the last month, but they're still up there. They still lead the league in pace on the season, and they're still playing at an elevated pace, no question. They still have a bottom 5 defense. They still allow the most points per game. There's still nothing about them that has you concerned really in any facet defensively. So Porter to me is a strong play here. And if you think this game stays close, I'm hoping it does, then hopefully we'd get the minutes back up from Porter. He played 34 minutes last game. He played 16 the game before that, got hurt though. 26 and then 28, then 32, 34, 26, 35, 44, 30, kind of all over the place. Willing to take the risk though. You're getting him sub 6K. You're getting him against the Hawks. Washington's my guess Washington probably has one of, if not the highest implied point total on this entire slate. Got to be top 2 or 3, maybe top 1. Yeah, it wouldn't be surprised. I'll tell you right now, actually. So the top point total right now. Okay, looks like Toronto, or I got the wrong slate. Toronto's not even on this one. So
that can change some things from time to time.
Yeah, that can make things different.
But let's be honest, we've done this show for 6 years, 5.5, 6 years. I'm going to say there are plenty of times where the wrong slate was pulled up.
Oh yeah, this wouldn't be the first time, no,
nor the last. So,
but a 233 total, they're 6-point favorites. Houston's 8-point favorites in a 230 total game. So you do the math; they're right there. And Porter should get the run. I don't see why he wouldn't. Also, if you wanted to play DeRozan here on DraftKings, I understand that. I don't have an issue with that. Chris Middleton against Brooklyn, 6,400, pretty reasonable as well. And you can get to a lot here. Satoransky's small forward eligible now too. Point guard.
Well, you see, and I think again, and we do focus on DK more than FanDuel here.
On the early bird, but on all of our other shows, right. We get to your FanDuel.
And honestly, Josh Engelman does a great job of working in FanDuel, and I respect the hell out of what Josh does, both from a live show perspective, but a content perspective on Osmo.com. But it seems like DK has shifted some eligibility here. Well, like we've seen over the past 5 to 7 days, a shift of some of these names to make them small forward eligible, where hopefully that benefits on a slate like this, where it may not have a week ago or 10 days ago. Anybody really cheap? You've mentioned a bunch of guys at small, at shooting guard that might be eligible here at small forward, but anyone that at least, again, that you feel like pops off the page this early on as you look through small forward before we hit power forward?
So you do have Bellinelli here. Kenrich Williams are both eligible at small forward. But even if we're not talking about dirt cheap, there are a few guys in the 5K range that do stand out. So it might not be loaded at the top. It might not be a top-heavy position. We do have a few. Man, Taurean Prince, I wish I could say he was a good player. He's getting minutes, but he has just been dreadful. I mean, he has been terrible since returning from injury. And I thought he'd have a nice breakout season here, especially given the lack of quality options on his team surrounding him. But aside from him, there are a few guys here that are pretty strong. I mean, Rudy Gay, does Rudy Gay get extra run with Derek White out? I don't know. It's possible. Even if he doesn't, I think he gets 30 minutes against Sacramento team that, as we all know, plays at a significantly elevated pace. That stands out to me as a very strong play. If you look at the differences between these two teams, you've got the Sacramento Kings playing at a top 10 pace over the last month, top 3 pace on the season, and the Spurs, bottom 10 over the last month and on the season. This is one of those teams that, as we know, never really plays at an elevated pace. They're playing at a bottom 9 pace on the year. I like this pace-up spot for the Spurs. I like that this game's got a 227.5 total, only a 2-point spread as well. It's in Sacramento, and they're playing good enough basketball right now. So he stands out. Trevor Ariza is another one, not seeing 40 minutes like he did when he initially came to Washington, but I don't think he's a terrible play here. He did get 39 minutes last game, and he has the upside to play 40 minutes in regulation. He still does, no question. 5,700 isn't terrible there either.
All right, let's hit on power forward center and head on out. I will remind you again, you can find Dave on Twitter at Lawfear _D, LOUGHY_D. You find him on SiriusXM, that is Sirius 210, XM 87, Saturday and Sunday. And of course, you find him regularly here on the DFS Early Bird and DFS Strategy Show, the Deep Dive, Monday through Friday. So you get a lot of Lawfear in your life. And, take that for what it's worth. So power forward here, you have you got it. Giannis is power forward eligible on DK, but if we take him out of the mix here, Blake. John Collins is 8,100 against Washington. Like that matchup. I like Collins' upside, and I'm finally coming around to Collins probably well after I should have. Aldridge has matchup with Sacramento at 8K. Fareed is all the way up to 7K. So Kenneth Fareed has had a great run here with Houston, but the price point has risen drastically over the past couple of weeks. Otto Porter Jr., Rudy Gay, and we move on from there. So between Blake, Collins, LaMarcus Aldridge, I should say, and Fareed, what do you got at power forward?
Yeah, not a bad spot. Not as good as the guard positions because the value isn't as deep. But I will tell you one thing right now. When you look at Kenneth Fareed, I actually still think he's viable here. Now, he fouled out in 20 minutes last game, but played 31 minutes against Denver, 30 against New Orleans. Like, he's going to get upwards of 30. I think we could see even more against this Phoenix team. And here's the truth. Phoenix just really bad at defending opposing centers. I don't care if DeAndre Ayton's back. It doesn't make a big difference. Sure, I'd prefer Dragon Bender, but it doesn't matter. Like, they've just been dreadful against them to begin with. Centers have the second highest efficiency against them this season, and we're at power forward, but Fareed's getting the minutes at the 5. Phoenix allows more points to centers than any other team this season. Only 3 teams allow more rebounds to opposing centers than the Phoenix Suns. Right? Oh, and a team like, or a guy like Kenneth Fareed, who's very capable of getting his hands in, and because he's a high hustle player, getting some steals. No team allows more steals to the position either. I really do like this spot for Fareed. I get that his price has come up, but I don't think he's priced out of play. You get 32, 33 minutes from Fareed here. I expect well over a fantasy point per minute, and 8-point spread, whatever. who knows? Maybe Phoenix keeps it close. I think Fareed would get 30 even if this game does blow out. So not crazy whatsoever. With John Collins, it's tough for me because, if you got lucky with Collins, and I don't say this to be condescending, but if you got lucky with Collins the other night, I'm not saying you got lucky because he had a good game. If you got lucky because he played 39 minutes for the first time in like months, right? His minutes had been consistently trending downwards. We know that. And if that is the case, well, if he's going to play another 35 plus minutes, or was this just because he was playing so well? I don't know. It's really tough. Lloyd Pierce has been doing things differently. They have so many players to use off the bench. We've talked about that. Adam and I countless times on the Deeper Dive. I mean, Amari Spellman played like 7 minutes in that game, right? And he had been playing 19, 20, 24. He'd been playing a lot more than that. A lot of it, will depend on what these other forwards, what these other fours happen to see. If Collins gets those type of minutes, even close, like 35 minutes against Washington, it's a good spot. He's been in foul trouble against Washington a lot this year in the games they played him. The only reason I say that isn't because I expect him to get in foul trouble again. But if you're looking at him and saying, oh, man, he hasn't been that great against them, well, consider this. He's averaging 27 minutes through 3 games against them and 41 fantasy points. So that per minute production is actually fantastic. Keep that in mind. Domantas Sabonis is a tournament option for me too, with his price tag dropping significantly. If you get 30 or 25 minutes from him here, he's 5,500. I just think you could do a lot worse than that, Dan. And then I don't think I mentioned him yet, but LaMarcus Aldridge against Sacramento. Tough not to like him with the way he's played. Aldridge has looked excellent lately after a really rough start to the season. Absolutely. I know it was a while ago now, but he's just looked so much better. Whether DeRozan's in or out, he's not overpriced. He's $8K. You're going to get heavy minutes from him in a game that I expect to stay very competitive. And if that's the case, Aldridge is very much in play. I love what he's doing as a rebounder. He's one of the best post players in the league, and I don't see anyone that can defend him in the post with everybody out in the front court for New Orleans.
Yeah, makes total sense. And this is a New Orleans team that continues to be decimated by injuries. You have Julius Randle out, Nikola Mirotic out. I guess Jahlil Okafor is there, but I don't think he's ever played defense. I'm pretty sure. So not really all that concerned about what could happen there. Any mid-tier or cheap guys here, power forward, who stand out? I would love if Reed was cheaper. I do agree with you wholeheartedly that the play has been there, the hustle's been there, and you know that there's still even upside at 7K. Not a ton, obviously, as you look through it, but any of these mid-tier or cheaper guys at least break into some of your consideration. A guy like maybe, does Hollis Jefferson get more minutes at this point? Does Bill Litza tickle your fancy? What do you got at the cheaper end of power forward?
I ain't letting anyone tickle my fancy guy. Watch yourself.
Well, I understand you're engaged. I apologize. I didn't mean to imply anything. That's my fault.
I know. I know. You're just.
Justine, I apologize. I apologize.
If she's asleep, don't worry.
And she doesn't listen. Let's be honest.
Exactly. No, of course not.
The only time my wife listens, and bless her soul, is that she is sitting in the room above me, and that she has to listen to my voice come through the floorboards.
She couldn't hear it.
So she has that earphones on for the TV. So
right, 100%. If Joe Harris is out, that could open some things up. Like, maybe Damari Carroll gets some extra run here. Maybe Rodions Kurucs or something, but I don't really want to play him on this slate. I think Carroll could be interesting if Harris is out, but really there is not a lot of value at this position. That's kind of why I mentioned Sabonis, just because you're going to have trouble. But you do have Otto Porter, on DraftKings. You still have some lesser priced guys, but we talked about most of them at small forward. And then you have like Rondae Hollis Jefferson, but even on this slate, even with this price point, do you get there? I think you probably have a tough time getting there. I'll throw him out there again, but the price is beginning to get to a point where I get concerned. Darius Miller, and really the only reason I'm talking about Miller, everyone knows that list. Everyone gives me a hard time on Twitter when he has a good game. Keep in mind, I've been playing Miller because he's been 3,800, 3,700.
Of course you were. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
But I just don't like these type of players that are so dependent on scoring. However, and I stated this, I think pretty clearly, right? if Miller's playing upwards of 40 minutes, I don't really care because he'll stumble into a decent game at that price. 4,800, that gets a little bit more difficult. I'll probably circle back to the guard positions, maybe the small forward positions, where I can find some better value. And if you want to get with some of the small forward, power forward eligible guys that we talked about, that makes sense too. The last guy I'll toss out there is a tournament play that I'm very interested in. Marvin Bagley played 28, or he's played 29, or sorry, since Bielitsa returned, 29, 20, 28, 33 minutes. It's so funny. On the deeper dive on Friday, I'm like, listen, if his minute upside is 29, 28 minutes. I don't, at 55 plus 100, I'm really not interested until, I'll sprinkle him in, but I'm not interested until we can start seeing some consistent minutes above that mark, at least knowing that he can get there. Because if he can get there, then on these slates where we have a lot of value, Bagley becomes way more valuable. He played 33 minutes against Philly. It literally happened always directly after I said, just like a slap in the face from the basketball guys. Say, oh, you think, even though I only know what I've seen. But 28 and then 33 minutes. Jaeger has to know right now that Bagley's like his best front court option. He's looked good.
You'd hope, yeah.
Yeah, and he's rebounding really well, and he's making an impact. He had a very good game against the Sixers. Mind you, they were coming off riding high against the Warriors win. But Bagley looked solid, man. Was it because of the matchup with the front court? Maybe, but I don't think so. It's not like the Sixers are running a massive front court anyway. Actually, they played pretty small a lot of that game. Ben played at the 4 a bit, but still. So I think Bagley is an intriguing tournament option that will probably still go relatively overlooked.
I like that. I like the call, and I think Bagley's a guy that you look back at the NBA draft and try to figure out exactly where they fit, and probably was not as ready as some projected him to be, but as the days go on, we'll just get a little bit more acclimated to the association, and I assume next year will be much better days for him, but the upside's there, and I like that call here on this slate, 6 games with the upside. Let's close it out by talking some centers. You have Jokic plus 10K at 10.5 against Andre Drummond and Detroit. Blake and Drummond are each eligible at center, 8.8 and 8.2 respectively. You get Collins, Aldridge, and Randall, who's out. Capella's out. And then we get into, did you think we would live in a world, whatever world that may be, where Jahlil Okafor would be 7-1 on DraftKings sometime in February in 2019?
Incredible, isn't it?
I mean, bless his soul. He's taken the most of his opportunity, and he's gotten it done. And again, Okafor was somebody you could see talent. You could see where he could benefit from playing time, but he is sort of the old guard of the NBA, a slow, plodding, back-to-the-basket center who doesn't play a ton of great help defense, good one-on-one.
Not a lot at all, actually.
Right, and so you get it, but push comes to shove, minutes are minutes, and you've made that mention before about mums and whether or not you came up with that 10 minutes before your presentation at FEU. That's fine.
On the flight, actually, yeah.
It might be, but he's been great. No, great's wrong. He's been serviceable, and he's done his job, but he's up to 7,100 on DK.
Still not getting there, though.
What do you got? What do you got here at center, 6-game slate?
It's funny. I think Okafor will still have decent ownership. I like Fareed more, though.
Okay.
At a similar cost. I like the matchup better. Per minute wise, I think Fareed's still your better play. Like Aldridge isn't that much more expensive. You're getting at a price with Okafor where, is it really worth it? And you know what? I respect Indiana's front court defense.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I think they're formidable enough for me to say I might go elsewhere. Now, Okafor has put up some solid games against some quality front courts, some good post defense, but I just don't think you need to get there. Not terrible. Should he get above 30 minutes again? I think he probably will. But I'm just not sold on it here. And I like some comparably priced players a little bit better. That's really what it comes down to. And we've talked about some of them like Fareed, like LaMarcus Aldridge. Miles Turner has played 30-plus in 2 straight games. That's encouraging. If I were to get 30-plus minutes every night out of Turner, I'd love that. 6,300 against this New Orleans front court that's so banged up that's, starting Okafor and playing Miller big minutes at the 4 and really doesn't have any bodies to run out there that are reliable defensively. I think Miles Turner is a pretty solid play. Ownership will come into play here at center. Like, where will Bagley be? Where will Turner be projected to be? Where will Jared Allen be at 5,100? He's a guy that I know you've talked about quite a bit recently. And, while he's super volatile, he does have upside, especially with his price continuing to fall. It is the cheapest we've seen Jared Allen in a while now. He's 5,100. So there's no question. There's definitely value here, which makes it a little bit tougher for me to get to Okafor. And I guess I probably have to talk just for a second about DeAndre Ayton, because as much as I like Fareed in this spot, he's not a big physical defender. He's somebody that, does his best defense comes in transition when he's tracking you down, and he's running you down, not in the half court, not around the basket unless he's, running full speed. And Ayton returned and played 33 minutes in his first game back. So there isn't much to worry about there. 6,800 is pretty appealing as well. It's a good position. And, of course, I won't spend much time on him, but Nikola Jokic at the top is always a viable play no matter who he's going up against. And I'd expect to see some very big minutes here against the towering front court and Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin.
Give me all the Brook Lopez, Dave.
Oh, yeah?
Give it all to me at 5,400.
The problem is when you're talking – okay, let me just hear me out. And I actually don't think you're wrong. He's not a terrible play. But,
he's not a terrible play.
But
is he a great play? No, but I will play plenty of Brook Lopez on Monday night.
That's fine. Just remember, when I say the reason I don't look at fantasy points allowed to position my team, I don't, because I want to see where the biggest numbers are coming from. And Brooklyn's really been crushed by centers in terms of rebounds. That's been a big thing. They have allowed a bunch of blocks too, so hopefully Brolo can thrive there. But is he the type of center that down low beats them up like so many of the others have? Probably not. He's somebody that, his three-point shooting has soared through the roof this year because they don't need him really to do anything else. When you have a guy like Giannis that leads the league in points in the paint, is it a crazy play? No. Do I wish Lopez was like 4,500 and would I have a whole lot more interest in him? Yes, but I definitely wouldn't fault you for having some interest in him.
I get it. I completely get it. Let's close it out as we always do. We do have the 10K and above club. It's Harden at 12.9. You get Giannis at 10.9. And then Jokic, I should say, at 10.5. Do you feel it's Harden, Giannis, or Nikola, who you're starting your lineup construction around if you're going 10K, 5-figure or above on Monday's slate?
Still got to be Harden for me, man. He's just too good, and prices come down. I get it. Chris Paul's return should play pretty hefty minutes, but against Phoenix, in Phoenix, I really love this spot for James Harden.
All right, so take that for what it is here early morning for the early bird. As always, you get the NBA Strategy Show. It'll be Adam and Josh over there on YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscription, and share it with friends. Leave a comment. We'll read it here on the podcast if we are so moved. But if you're on iTunes, like, subscribe, and share as well. You get Josh and Adam on the NBA Strategy Show at 9:15. Then you get the Deep Bird Dive at 5 p.m., the live before lock, leading you up to lock with Josh or Spags and Ed Fear. And you get Dave and I back Wednesday and Friday here on the Early Bird. Tomorrow morning, you get EMAC, you get Adam right here on the DFS Early Bird, presented by Awesemo.com.